Okay, we're going to try something a little bit different today. And it might work out and be a tremendous success, and it might be a colossal failure. So we're going to try to introduce some technology into the show today. Welcome back, by the way, Psycho fans. Before we get started, I just want to thank everybody for the recent subs. Made a lot of progress in the last couple months, especially the last few weeks. Big thumbs up for that. Thanks, by the way, for liking the videos. Thanks for sharing them on social media, Twitter, Facebook. I see all the likes and shares and stuff that you put out there. So that's really helping growing the channel. So I appreciate everything that you've done so far. Even the critics out there who like to post comments, I read them. You're still welcome to post comments and follow the channel too. So the discussion is open for everyone. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, if you couldn't figure it out from the description of the video, we're going to talk about the Toyota FJ Cruiser. Well, Chris, why are we going to talk about that? Well, because as you know, I like to save money. I like nice things, but I don't like spending money for nice things. And so you know as well as I know that I'm a cheap SOB. So if I can find a way to get something on the cheap, I'm going to try to do so. And so this is going to be a great example of some tools that you can use, an example of how you can go out there and shop for something really nice and not have to spend a lot of money in order to get it. But you're going to have to be smart about it. You're going to have to do your due diligence. And no one's going to spoon feed this to you. So you just got to be aware of what's out there and then look for the right deals and grab onto them when you can. So the reason I picked the FJ Cruiser is it is a great example of getting into a car where the depreciation on the car is extremely low. And if you have to get out of the car, you can get out of it whenever you have to sell it for almost as much as you got into it. And as we've talked about in many other videos, depreciation is the biggest killer in any car that you get, especially a new car. If you buy a new car, you can expect to lose 50% of its value in the first 3 years. That's kind of an average. Some cars do better, some cars do worse. But you take a huge hit when you buy a new car. So that's why I keep telling you, if you're looking for a car out there and you can find something that's a couple years old, it's 98% of what you're looking for, you're probably going to save, 40 or 50%. You can pocket that money, you're going to have a car that's almost new and almost exactly like the one that's sitting in the showroom that's still got a window sticker on it. So let's just kind of do some groundwork here on the FJ Cruiser and what it's all about, and then we'll get into the details. Okay, first, the FJ Cruiser was built from 2006 to 2014, and they built about 200,000 of them over that production span. About 100,000 of that 200,000 were in the first 2 years, 06 and 07. And then after that, they started tailing off. But it was sort of an homage to the FJ40 of the past, the Toyotas you see out in the National Geographic Channel, out in the Serengeti. It's kind of the Land Rover, Toyota, those were the old sort of Jeep-like vehicles that they used out there. And then, of course, the FJ kind of morphed into the Land Cruiser. And now, of course, the Land Cruiser is like a really upscale, luxurious 4x4. And it's great. It's still legendary, but it's a totally different animal than what the FJ was. The Land Cruiser is more like a Range Rover. And so the FJ was sort of, a cheaper alternative, a more rugged, masculine alternative without all the luxurious stuff in it for people who wanted to have a nice sport utility vehicle without spending $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for it. And really, the 4Runners are getting really expensive too. You get a 4Runner Limited. Those are probably $40,000, $50,000 now. So when they started production of the FJ, it was a huge success. And something interesting happened as soon as they brought it into production. People who had them and people who were reselling them were getting almost as much money for them as they bought them for when they were new. And this phenomenon continued throughout the entire model run from 06 to 2014. It really didn't matter which model you bought in the FJ line. Was it a limited model or their TRD pack? It didn't matter. 2x4, 4x4, what year it was. The FJ itself was holding an unlimited amount of resale value compared to pretty much anything else out there. It led the market in this category. I knew this, and for several years I thought about buying an FJ, just because they're holding their value so well. But I didn't need one. So I mean, it's one thing that if there's a great deal out there, but if you don't need the great deal, then there's no sense in spending the money for it. But I wanted to bring up, and I got my tablet here. What I'm doing, I'm looking on my TV here in the garage. So I'm going to try to go through the tablet here, and I'll bring these slides up on the video here so you can see what I'm seeing. Just some general pictures of the FJ. But I just want to give you some background on the FJ. And here's a slide. I forget which website I pulled this up on, but it basically listed the top 10 cars for sale that had the highest resale value. And they listed it, each car from number 10 to number 1 being the best. And as you can see here, the FJ Cruiser held 91.5% of its resale value over the first 3 years. So, that is a huge incentive to get into a vehicle that's not going to lose a lot of money. Now, obviously, you have other costs involved when you buy a car. You got insurance and registration and taxes and gas and all that stuff. But that's really pass-through stuff because you have to pay that stuff anyways, no matter what car you buy. So instead of buying a new car that loses 50% in the first 3 years, or worse, 60, in the late 90s, early 2000s, some of the Chevy stuff was losing 65, 70% of its value in the first 3 years. Like Chevy Cavaliers and stuff, they were cesspools where you could just take money and just, light them with a match, and you would have been better off than putting money into one of those cars. But here's just a great example that further underscores my point of just how great the FJ Cruiser fared in the resale market. So this is sort of a baseline of what we know about the FJ. We know it holds its value really well. So let's take a concrete example of what we could have done, knowing what we knew. And we would have known this back in 2007, 2008, right when the FJ started production, because the signs are already there. The market forces were already there. This isn't Monday morning quarterbacking it and looking at it in the past saying, well, if we knew then what we knew now, it'd be a different story, but there's no way of knowing that. Untrue. Not true at all. These market forces have been in place for years, almost since the FJ started production. So let's take a concrete example of what we could have done had we gotten into an FJ and how it would have played out. So let me go to the next slide here and see if I can find it. Let's look and see what an FJ was back in 2007. Let's say we were shopping for one. Here's the next slide. And I went on, I don't know what it was, one of the websites where you can configure cars. So I went back to 2007, and I configured an 07 FJ Cruiser with typical packages that you would have ordered back then. And I didn't get like a limited package that would have made it, especially rare or a special color or anything like that. This was your garden variety FJ Cruiser back then that would have been on every lot at a Toyota dealership. So base price $22,110. I threw a couple sort of convenience packages and premium packages. And this one I configured as a 4x2. It's not a 4x4. So this really is even less desirable than most of the FJs. The FJs you really probably want are the 4x4s, and this is a 4x2. So any market force that we show here in this example is probably going to be understating whatever we're saying, okay? So this is a really good baseline to start with. So 22,110 is base. I configured it 26,400 MSRP. That's very standard. That's very representative of an FJ Cruiser in 07. Okay, so that's our baseline of what it would have cost. 26,400. Now, yeah, there would have been state taxes and title and all that stuff, but you would have paid that no matter what car you bought. Any $26,000 car, you would have paid that, whether it was a Toyota or a Honda or whatever. So to keep this discussion as simple as possible so we don't get into the weeds, we're just going to deal with the numbers on the car. Okay, 26,400. So now let's go to the next slide. Now, I went on eBay Motors, and you could have done this on cars.com or AutoTrader or anywhere else, but eBay is just easier for me. And I wanted to find a car from 2007, an FJ, that was as close to the spec that I spec'd out for that 2007 26,400 MSRP. So I found this one, same color, 2007 FJ. It's a 4x2. It had the same packages on the car that we spec'd on a new car. This one has 63,000 miles. That's very average. There's nothing strange or extraordinary about this car. This is your average, ordinary garden variety, everyday 2007 FJ Cruiser. They're a dime a dozen. As you can see here in the ad, and this ad was put on a few weeks ago. I don't remember what it sold for, but I'm sure it's already sold by now. The buy it now price was $22,950. Now, this price was extremely representative of all the listings of FJs on eBay Motors and on Cars.com and Auto Trader and any other website out there. This was not too high. This was not. In fact, there were plenty of FJs out there that were asking high 20s, low 30s that were 6 and 7 years old. So again, I wanted to take a really garden variety car here that understates everything. So if the market forces apply to this FJ, it's definitely going to apply to all the other ones too. So let's say we were shopping for this car and we bought it in 07, right? We bought it for $26,400, and now it's 10 years later. It's 2016, and we got to get out of it. We need to sell the car. We put it on eBay Motors, and we're asking $22,900 for it. Well, let's say back in 07, when we were at the dealership, we negotiated from $26,400 to $26,000. So we bought it for $26,000. $400 the dealer knocks off. That's not too extravagant. Now we're listing it for $22,900, and we fart around with it for a week or two, and somebody offers us $22,000. That's extremely reasonable. That's not a low ball offer. That's not a high ball offer. Taking $1,000 off is still representative of where these cars would be selling right now in the used car market. So let's say, just to keep the math really easy, we sell it for $22,000. Okay, so to recap, so we understand we're all on the same page here, we bought the car for $26,000 in 2007, and now in 2016, we're selling it for $22,000. Okay, a 10-year span, and it's basically lost $4,000 in valuation. Okay, now let's start doing some of the math here, and this is where we're going to add some technology to this video, and this may work out right, and this may not, but I'm going to try to do this on my tablet here so you can see what I'm doing. So let me go into my notes here and pop this up, and we're going to do some math here and kind of see where the numbers play out. Okay. Let me change this. Template. Blank. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to take the $26,400 that was the asking price in 2007, and we negotiated it down to $26,000. Okay, so we've got an FJ Cruiser, 2007, and we bought that out the door, so to speak, for $26,000. Now, in 2016, we're selling this car. We got to get out of it. Who knows what reason we have, but we need to sell it. We put it on eBay Motors, and we sold it for $22,000 after we were asking $22,950. So the difference there is $4,000. Okay, so that is the depreciation value basically over that 10-year span. So if we do the math on that, let me grab my cell phone here, which is going to substitute as a calculator. We've had the car for 10 years, which is 120 months. Okay, and we're going to divide that by the $4,000 it's cost us in depreciation in order to drive that car. So $4,000 divided by 120 months is $33 a month. Okay, 33. So that number basically, $33 a month, is how much it would have cost us to have driven that FJ Cruiser over 10 years. Now, obviously there are other costs involved, and I mentioned this already. You've got maintenance, you've got insurance, you've got gas, you've got any, registration fees and taxes and all that stuff. But those are really inconsequential because if we were shopping for a new car back in 2007, we're going to have maintenance costs anyways. And this car probably had a 4 or 5 year warranty on it. So for the first 4 or 5 years, there weren't any really major maintenance costs to begin with. There would have been a couple of oil changes, fuel oil changes, maybe tire rotation, new tires and stuff. But you get that with every car. You're going to have to pay that regardless. That was my phone that just fell. So we can really scratch off maintenance because over the last 5 years when the car was out of warranty, it's still a Toyota. I mean, we're not buying an exotic car here that's going to kill us in maintenance. So Toyotas are pretty reliable. So it's not going to cost us that much more than any other car. So we scratch maintenance off. Insurance, you have to have insurance on every car. Now, insurance on an FJ, a brand new FJ, would be more expensive than a 20-year-old Toyota. But the difference isn't going to be that much. The difference between a 2007 FJ in 2007 and a 2007 Acura, not much. So we can really get rid of insurance because the delta between the two isn't all that much. Gas, you got to put gas in every car. Gas will cost more in an FJ than a Prius, but again, it's peanuts. And then registration taxes, all that stuff. You have to pay that every year in every car, no matter what. So really, for purposes of this discussion, to keep it simple, those costs are really just pass-through costs that we would have had regardless, no matter what we were driving. So the bottom line is, had you been a smart consumer back in 2006, 2007, 2008, when they first started building these FJs and you got into one, you could have been driving a $25,000 brand new car for next to nothing, for $33 a month. Now think about that, $33 a month. You can't go to Budget, you can't go to Avis, Hertz, any of these rental car companies and rent the absolute worst shitbox, subcompact, two-door, lawnmower engine car from them for less than about $30 a day. So basically, in this scenario with the FJ, you're driving a brand new $25,000 FJ for the cost of renting a car for one day. And yet the FJ is a hell of a lot nicer than whatever you're going to get at Avis for that same price, for $33 in a day to rent a car for a day. It's going to have all, airbags and ABS and all that stuff. It's the exact car you wanted back then. So it's 30 times the value, but really it's more than that because you're just getting a much better car. So the value is, exponentially greater than that. So this is just one example of many out there where you can get into a car that doesn't cost you a lot of money and it's a good car. Now, some of you out there will say, yeah, well, I bought a 1999 or a 2001 car for $5,000 and I could still sell it for $5,000 today. Well, I understand that, but that's apples and oranges. That's a different scenario. That's a used car. That's a 20-year-old used car, 15-year-old used car, and you're selling it as a used car. This is a new car. New cars that depreciate, they drop like the Dow Jones sometimes, in their depreciation. If it was another car that was $26,000 back in 07, by 2010 it probably would have been worth $12,500. So the FJ is a great example of how you can get into a car for not a lot of money, but you got to look for the right cars. And the FJ is the most extreme example of that, but there are other really good ones, maybe not 91.5% of the resale value after 3 years, but in the 80s. There are a few trucks out there that are the same way. There are some other cars. So if you're an informed consumer, if you're a smart consumer, you'll go out there and you'll find those deals, okay? And if you're looking for a new car or a recent, a fairly new car, even today, if you said, Chris, okay, yeah, great, but it sounds like that deal's passed on the FJ. I wish we would have got into it back then, but now we're screwed. What's this have to do with us now? Well, it still applies now. The FJ market forces are still in force. So let's say we bought that car that I showed you for $22,000. It's a 2007. Well, my guess is in another 5 or 10 years, it's still going to be worth $17,000 or $18,000. So again, it's costing you very little in order to drive that car. So you need to look for those cars out there that have great resale value, that hold their value, have great long-term valuations on them, and then target those cars to own. If you want to drive a car on the cheap, if you want to drive a nice newer car on the cheap. Now, if you didn't want an FJ and it just wasn't for you, or you had 10 cars and you didn't need another one, then none of this applies to you. But I'm the type of person that I could pretty much drive anything as a daily driver if it was a great deal, and especially for $33 a month. I'll drive practically any new car for $33 a month. And FJs, they were pretty cool cars back then. So I'm kind of shopping for one here. You know, I don't really need one, but it would be a great car if something happened or you wanted to get into something, and if you needed to get out of it, you'd pretty much get most or all of your money back. So just use this example and apply it to your own car shopping and see if there are some deals out there for you. If I find some other cars that have great valuations that are new or almost new that you can get into on the cheap, I'll try to bring those up and mention them to you in other videos. If you like this video, like it. If you thought it was helpful, let me know. If you didn't like this video, don't like it. Thanks again for all the subs in the last few weeks. Share this video on your Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. You can follow me at ChrisWorldTV. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe today so you never miss an episode. Take care.